In Kansas City, public television with quality programming for eastern Kansas and western Missouri.
Acquisition of this program for broadcast on KCPT has been made possible by a grant from Commerce Brokerage Services Incorporated, which features savings on brokerage commissions, over-the-phone convenience for buying or selling stocks, and up-to-the-minute quotes on over 39,000 stocks.
In our report, the airline industry wonders whether TWA's bid for Pan Am will fly.
But stocks take off on Wall Street for the second straight session.
The Nightly Business Report, made possible by Digital Equipment Corporation, the company that makes all your computers work as one. The $42 billion Franklin Group of Funds, one of America's major mutual fund organizations for over 43 years. Franklin funds are distributed nationwide by investment professionals. A.G. Edwards, member of the New York Stock Exchange, serving the investment needs of individuals and businesses through more than 400 offices nationwide. And by the financial support of viewers like you. NBR is produced in association with Reuters, the world's largest electronic publisher.
Good evening. For the second trading session in a row, Wall Street managed to shake off the gloom and find a silver lining to the economic outlook, sending the Dow up almost 52 points. With the details, here's Paul.
Following last Friday's impressive 45-point gain in the Dow Industrial Average, the stock market extended its strong performance this morning, fueled by over a $1 per barrel drop in oil futures, plus a growing consensus the Federal Reserve would continue to lower interest rates. In a straight-line advance, the Dow rose almost 37.5 points by noontime, with 1,000 stocks higher and only about 400 lower in fairly active trading. Spearheaded by such stalwarts as IBM, General Electric, and Procter & Gamble, the rally gathered more momentum in the afternoon, and after seeing no signs of a pullback, the scared bears ran to cover short positions, and that helped the Dow Industrial Average jump to a closing gain of 51.74, putting it at 2,540.35. Theoretical high of the day almost at 25.51, the low some 60 points under that. Trading volume today perked up from Friday's pace to 161.4 million shares, and up volume ran away from down volume. No contest there. The Dow Transports, due to those lower oil prices, up over 33.25 points. Utilities doing well, up over 1.75 points, and the closing tick still a bullish plus 236. The Standard & Poor's 500 of a 5.75 point gain, nearly a 6.25 point jump of the 400. The 100 up nearly 5.5 points, and the Commodity Research Bureau December index down 0.95. The New York Stock Exchange index rose nearly 3 points, almost a 3.5 point jump on the value line, and the Wilshire 5000 up 52 2/3 points, or nearly so. With the federal government shut down for the Veterans Day holiday, there was no trading in Treasury securities, but the trend in corporate and municipal bonds was 8 1/4 higher. I'll be back shortly to show you where the action was on Wall Street today. Jim?
Paul, it was up and away on Wall Street, but TWA Chairman Carl Icahn was the talk of the airline industry today with his last-minute bid to buy Pan Am. New York correspondent Scott Gervey reports.
What is Carl Icahn up to? Is the TWA chairman serious in his $450 million bid to buy his chief competitor, or is he just trying to stop the sale of Pan Am's London routes to United Airlines? The TWA offer was contained in a letter from Icahn dated Friday and released by Pan Am yesterday. Icahn declined an interview request today. So did Thomas Plaskett, the chairman of Pan Am. The industry is buzzing. Pan Am is in desperate need of cash. The sale of its London routes to United was to close Friday and net $400 million. Icahn's bid is good only if the UAL deal is canceled. And American Airlines has also tried to upset the UAL deal with a competing bid for the London routes. Pan Am rejected the American offer.
We have seen a variety of route sales, asset transfers take place, and I believe that over the next year or so we will see a vast number of such asset transfers or sales as some of the financially weak carriers seek to dispose of some of the surplus assets that they have, and they shrink their operations.
The money-making Pan Am shuttle is reportedly not included in the TWA bid, but TWA has proposed buying it by the end of the year. The credit watchers at Standard & Poor's said today the TWA-Pan Am combination could be good for both companies, but they warned that Pan Am could run out of cash before the American and foreign governments approve the deal. Scott Gervey, NBR, New York.
Now, as Paul noted, oil prices closed sharply lower on the belief that a war in the Middle East is not likely soon. Also contributing to the decline was a comment from a Saudi oil company executive who said that oil prices could drop by as much as a third from their current levels, even if there is a war. The December contract for light sweet crude tumbled $2.02 on the New York Merc to close at $31.87 a barrel. Prices also dropped in London. The major players in the U.S. oil industry are getting together this week in Chicago for the convention of the industry's trade group, the American Petroleum Institute. But as Chicago correspondent Leslie Nichol reports, the oil executives appear less concerned about the possibility of falling prices than they are about other issues.
Petroleum analysts say domestic oil production has dropped steadily for the last 5 years in a row, from 3.7 billion gallons in 1985 to 3.3 billion gallons in 1989. With the Persian Gulf crisis threatening world supply, members of the American Petroleum Institute gathered at their convention in Chicago say access to drilling on public lands is their prime concern. So far, API spokesmen say oil firms are stymied by a congressional moratorium on exploration in environmentally sensitive areas.
I would certainly hope that any part of an energy policy would be to try to produce for the American consumer the most reasonably priced energy in order to keep the economy going consistent with the environment. I firmly believe that in part that should be solved by opening up the offshore and the ANWR for exploration and development.
While environmental legislation right now limits production, the New Clean Air Act, with its strict emission standards, has the industry scrambling to reformulate gasoline. Even though the API has mounted a joint effort with the big three automakers to come up with cleaner gasoline, petroleum experts do not believe they can come up with a new product in time to comply with a 1995 deadline set in the Clean Air Act.
No one to my knowledge has made such a gasoline, nor to my knowledge does anyone currently know exactly how to do that.
Although environmental concerns may be constricting the industry at home, other frontiers outside the country remain open. One analyst says the Soviet Union is ripe for Western involvement in oil production.
For the U.S. industry, the sort of torture you've received from the government over the years, environmental controls and strict adherence to safety standards, actually gives you a real opportunity in the Soviet Union.
Even so, API does not expect opportunities in the Soviet Union to open up before 1995. Leslie Nichol, NBR, Chicago.
A British inquiry into the 1988 accident at the Piper Alpha oil rig has taken Occidental Petroleum to task for allegedly unsafe practices. The accident, which claimed 167 lives at the Occidental installation in the North Sea, was the world's worst oil rig explosion. The report also slammed the British government for lax supervision of its offshore oil industry, and it recommends tough new standards for oil and gas companies that own and operate rigs. Occidental says it acted responsibly following the disaster, and it will implement any further changes indicated by the inquiry.
On the precious metals markets, gold posted modest losses in quiet trading. The December contract fell $3 to close at $383.30 an ounce. Silver prices also fell, while platinum moved higher. And the dollar ended mostly lower, pressured by speculation that the Federal Reserve will soon ease credit policy. The dollar lost more than a pfennig and 1.25 yen. The pound held steady against the greenback. Many currency players were sidelined with the Veterans Day observance in the United States and Emperor Akihito's coronation in Tokyo.
The dollar's persistent slide has caused a split within the group of 7 leading industrialized nations. Reuters correspondent Steen Stovall reports from London that the G7 is divided over how to respond to the dollar's fall.
The Bush administration says it isn't that worried about the falling dollar, and that attitude is echoed in Germany, which is more concerned with managing the huge cost of absorbing what was East Germany without igniting inflation. The strong mark will help keep German prices down. But the French are worried. Paris says the falling dollar is hitting its exports hard. It wants G7 leaders to do something about it soon.
The French are worried about the low value of the dollar because it's putting pressure on French industry.
The French call has so far found no echo in other G7 countries. Analysts say the split over the dollar shows that G7 policymakers are mainly concerned with domestic rather than international economic problems. That may be understandable, but that tendency is likely to reinforce speculation that world economic cooperation is slowing down, just when it needs to be revitalized.
It does show the relative decline of international cooperation on these macroeconomic questions. And similarly in the field of trade, the GATT talks are in some considerable difficulty.
The dollar's fall has so far been an orderly one. Central banks have therefore not felt compelled to support the greenback on currency markets. Economists say the dollar is undervalued now relative to the fundamental strength of the U.S. economy. Part of the reason is that U.S. interest rates are less attractive than those offered in other major countries.
The decline in American interest rates compared to interest rates in Europe is reducing the attractiveness of the dollar and therefore pushing the dollar down. I think that will continue for some time yet.
Analysts say they don't expect the G7 to move soon to prop up the dollar. That's because a cheap greenback is powering U.S. exports. It's also helping other countries dampen the inflationary impact of higher oil prices, which are charged in dollars. Steen Stovall of Reuters for NPR, London.
The top official of the GATT trade organization says talks on reforming world farm trade remain deadlocked despite an offer by the European community to reduce agricultural subsidies. Arthur Dunkel says the situation is unlikely to change without some major political decisions. As a result, Dunkel says 4 years of negotiations to reform the world trading system are now in jeopardy.
For the bears of Wall Street, a case of double jeopardy between Friday's 45-point gain and today's gain of nearly 51 3/4 points on the Dow. A big move up. A lot of analysts, I say, this is the long-awaited reflex rally in a bear market. Some say it might be more than that. Anyway, nearly 1,150 issues up, only 379 down. And 14 new highs for the year and the smallest number of new lows, 38, that we've seen in a long time. Topping the active list for the second session running. The biggest blue, IBM, up 2 3/4 today on 3.5 million shares. It did introduce its new portable personal computer and apparently was well received. American Express rose 2 points and Fannie Mae up 1.5. Both of these stocks were mentioned favorably in the Wall Street Journal's Heard on the Street column. Michael Steinhardt, the money manager who is basically bearish, does like these two stocks. Pan Am moving up just 1/4 point. Obviously, traders on Wall Street not too impressed with Carl Icahn's buyout bid. PepsiCo, a 5/8 point gain, 5th in volume. Bank American, a strong financial sector, up 1.5. Philip Morris gained 5/8. Citicorp up a full point. Duke Bauer edged up 1/4. And then GE, a 1 5/8 point gain. AMR, parent company of American Airlines, on those lower oil prices, up 1 7/8. American Telephone rose 7/8. Compaq Computer rising 2 1/4 after Goldman Sachs repeated a buy recommendation. Disney rose 1.5 points down.